I can't marry you. You betrayed the woman who made you. Juliet's voice cracked as she tore off her diamond ring and hurled it at Umaru's face, the gem glinting with betrayal under Eldoret's dawn. What secret shattered this moment? Welcome, story lovers. Where are you tuning in from? Nairobi, New York, or somewhere else? Drop your location in the comments and tell us, can love survive ambition, or will greed destroy it? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to catch our latest heart-wrenching tales. Kamaria, a radiant Kenyan woman, sacrificed her medical dreams for Umaru's future, only to face heartbreak when he, now a wealthy CEO, abandoned her. What devastating truth did Juliet uncover? Will justice prevail or will promises fade? Stay until the end. This ending will leave you speechless. Like, comment, and subscribe for more. The air in St. Paul's Secondary School was thick with tension, the kind that clings to the skin like dust after a long, dry season in Eldoret, Kenya. 17-year-old Umaru sat hunched over his desk, his worn economics textbook splayed open, its pages yellowed and held together by a fraying string. His pencil, chewed to a stub, scratched furiously across the exam paper, each calculation a desperate plea to escape the poverty that shackled his family to a one-room shack on the edge of town. The classroom buzzed with the soft rustle of papers and the occasional cough. But for Umaru, the world had narrowed to the numbers before him, numbers that held the key to a university scholarship, his only way out. Sweat beaded on his forehead, dripping onto the paper and smudging his work. His heart pounded as he glanced at the clock. 10 minutes left. Across the room, Kamaria watched him, her deep brown eyes catching the sunlight that streamed through the cracked windows. At 18, she was a vision, her radiant beauty turning heads wherever she went, her smile a beacon in the chaos of their small town. But beneath her grace burned a fierce intellect and a heart that carried the weight of her own dreams. A full scholarship to study medicine at the University of Nairobi, where she would become a pediatrician, saving children from the illnesses that haunted communities like theirs. Kamaria's gaze softened as she saw Umaru's pencil snap under the pressure, his hands trembling as he fumbled for a spare. She knew this exam was his lifeline. She had known him since they were children. Umaru, the boy who shared his only pencil when hers broke, who stayed up late dreaming aloud of building businesses to lift Eldoret from its struggles. His failure would mean more than a missed grade. It would chain him to the same backbreaking labor that had aged his father before his time. "Time!" barked Mr. Otieno, the economics teacher, his voice slicing through the room like a blade. Umaru froze, his paper half filled, equations trailing off into despair. Around him, classmates in crisp uniforms gathered their branded calculators and pristine textbooks, chattering about weekend plans. Umaru remained seated, staring at the incomplete answers that mocked his dreams. The scholarship, his only escape, slipped further away with each tick of the clock. He gathered his tattered bag and shuffled out, the weight of failure pressing against his chest. The afternoon sun blazed over Eldoret's central market, a vibrant maze of colorful stalls where vendors hawked roasted maize in woven baskets. The air was alive with the scent of fried plantains and the melodic calls of traders, their voices weaving through the honks of matatus navigating the narrow streets. Umaru's stomach growled, but the few shillings in his pocket were for the ride home, not food. He quickened his pace, trying to outrun the hunger and the shame of the morning's exam. A familiar laugh stopped him in his tracks. There behind a wooden table piled with maize sat Kamaria, her bright yellow headscarf catching the sunlight like a flame. She was counting the day's earnings from her mother's stall, her infectious smile lighting up the faces of customers. At 18, she carried herself with a confidence born of supporting her family while excelling in school. "Umaru!" she called, waving him over. "You look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong?" He hesitated, pride warring with desperation. Kamaria had been his closest friend since childhood, the girl who shared her lunch when his was forgotten, who stayed after school to explain algebra when it baffled him. Under the shade of the massive baobab tree that loomed over the market square, its gnarled branches stretching like ancient arms, Umaru finally broke. The words tumbled out, raw and jagged. The failed exam, his family's inability to pay school fees, his mother's quiet sobs when she thought he wasn't listening. "I won't make it to university," he whispered, his voice cracking. "All those dreams, building businesses, helping Eldoret, it's over, Kamaria." The market's clamor faded as Kamaria absorbed his pain. She had always known Umaru's family struggled, but seeing her strongest friend, the boy who had shielded her from market bullies and shared his wildest ambitions, reduced to hopelessness, broke something inside her. "No," she said, her voice firm, her eyes blazing with a fire that could rival the sun. "This is not how your story ends." She reached into her woven bag and pulled out a small tin, its surface dented from years of use. Inside was every shilling she had saved for medical school, coins and crumpled notes earned from tutoring younger students and long hours at her mother's stall. The money was her future, her chance to save lives, her escape from the same poverty that haunted Umaru. "Take it," she said, pressing the tin into his trembling hands. Umaru's eyes widened, his breath catching. "Kamaria, no. That's your medical school fund. Your dream." She gripped his shoulders, her voice steady but fierce. "You're the smartest person I know, Umaru. You have the power to change not just your life, but this entire town. I believe in you more than you believe in yourself." The tin felt impossibly heavy in his hands, each coin a piece of her future offered freely to secure his. "I'll pay you back," he said urgently, tears streaming down his face. "Every shilling, I swear. When I'm successful, I'll make sure you get everything you deserve. We'll build that future together, like we always planned." Kamaria smiled, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She was gambling her entire future on faith. Faith in Umaru, in their friendship, in the belief that love and loyalty would triumph over hardship. "Promise me something else," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the rustle of the baobab's leaves. "Promise you'll never forget where you came from, or the people who believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself." "I promise," Umaru said solemnly, pulling her into a tight embrace. The baobab tree stood witness, its ancient roots drinking in the weight of their vow. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery oranges, neither could imagine the trials that awaited. The seeds of triumph and heartbreak had been sown in that sacred moment, and destiny was already weaving its intricate web around their intertwined fates. For now, under the baobab's shade, their bond felt unbreakable, a beacon of hope in a world that offered none. The University of Nairobi's campus sprawled like a city of dreams, its manicured lawns and modern lecture halls a far cry from the dusty streets of Eldoret. Umaru, now 22, strode through the bustling quad, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the tattered clothes he'd worn 5 years ago. His once calloused hands now gripped a sleek leather briefcase, and his steps carried the confidence of a man who had conquered every obstacle in his path. Kamaria's sacrifice, the tin of shillings that had funded his scholarship, had been the spark, but Umaru's relentless drive had fanned it into a blazing fire of success. The boy who once begged for pencil stubs was now a Dean's List scholar, courted by corporate giants for his brilliance in economics. The air in the lecture hall hummed with anticipation as students in crisp uniforms hurried to their seats, smartphones glinting in the afternoon light. Umaru sat near the front, his notes meticulously organized, his mind already racing toward the next opportunity. His thesis on microfinance had earned whispers of awe from professors, and internships at top firms had polished his raw talent into something formidable. Each achievement was a brick in the tower of prosperity he was building, a testament to the promise he'd made under the baobab tree. Yet as he scribbled equations, a faint unease stirred, a memory of Kamaria's voice, her eyes blazing with faith in him. He hadn't called her in months, too swept up in the whirlwind of his new world. "Umaru!" Professor Okas's voice cut through the chatter, beckoning him to the front of the hall. The professor, a towering figure with a reputation for spotting genius, wore a rare smile. "Stay after class. I have news." Umaru's pulse quickened, his mind spinning with possibilities. As the lecture ended, students filed out, their laughter fading into the corridor. Professor Okoth leaned against his desk, holding a letter embossed with the logo of Zenith Capital, Kenya's titan of finance. Your thesis on microfinance caught their eye, he said, his voice brimming with pride. They're offering you a junior executive position in Nairobi's financial district. 6 figures, company car, corner office. This is the kind of break most graduates only dream of. Umaru's breath caught, his heart pounding like a drum. Zenith Capital was a gateway to Kenya's elite, a world of power and influence he'd only glimpsed in magazines. The salary alone could erase his family's struggles, buy his mother a proper home, and silence the gnawing fear of poverty that still haunted his dreams. He shook Professor Okoth's hand, his grin masking the small voice whispering Kamaria's name. Her sacrifice had opened this door, but the guilt of his silence sat like a stone in his stomach. "Thank you, sir," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I won't let them down." That evening, Umaru's dorm room felt like a shrine to his ambition. Economics textbooks lined the shelves, framed certificates adorned the walls, and a photo of his family, smiling in their Eldoret shack, sat tucked in a corner, gathering dust. He paced the room, the Zenith offer letter in hand, its weight heavier than the paper itself. Success was within reach, so close he could taste it, but the distance between his old life and this new one yawned like a chasm. He picked up his phone, Kamaria's number staring back at him. He owed her this moment, didn't he? With a deep breath, he dialed. "Umaru, is it really you?" Kamaria's voice was warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds, instantly transporting him back to Eldoret's market square. He could picture her, probably sitting in her family's modest home, her bright fabrics a splash of color against the worn furniture. "Tell me everything," she urged, her excitement infectious. Umaru leaned against his desk, the words spilling out. The Zenith job, the corner office, the company car waiting in Nairobi's glittering financial district. He painted a picture of a life he'd only dreamed of as a boy, each detail a testament to the future they'd envisioned together. "I'm so proud of you," Kamaria said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "All those dreams we shared, they're coming true." Umaru swallowed hard, caught off guard by the formality in his own tone. "Our dreams," he corrected, though the words felt rehearsed like lines from a script he no longer fully believed. He promised to send money for her education, to honor the vow he'd made, but even as he spoke, a strange detachment crept in. Kamaria's world, Eldoret's dusty stalls, her mother's maze business, felt impossibly distant from the glass towers awaiting him. As they hung up, Umaru stared out his window at the campus lights, their glow a promise of the life ahead. He imagined himself in Nairobi's elite circles, rubbing shoulders with CEOs and policymakers, his name in headlines. The guilt lingered, but it was drowned out by the siren call of ambition. Kamaria's sacrifice had been the foundation, but this was his moment, his triumph. He set the phone down, the photo of his family catching his eye. He turned it face down, unable to meet their gazes, and stepped into the night, the city's pulse pulling him forward. In the quiet of his dorm, the Zenith letter lay open, its words a contract not just with a company, but with a new version of himself. The boy from Eldoret was fading, replaced by a man who could command boardrooms and reshape economies. Yet as he closed his eyes, the baobab tree flickered in his mind, its roots deep, its branches wide, a silent witness to a promise that still bound him, whether he acknowledged it or not. For now, Umaru stood at the edge of glory, unaware that every step toward success would test the vows he'd made, and that the cost of forgetting them would be far greater than he could imagine. The Serena Hotel's rooftop glowed under Nairobi's starlit sky, its terrace alive with the clink of champagne flutes and the murmur of Kenya's business elite. Umaru, now a rising star at Zenith Capital, moved through the crowd with a grace that belied his Eldoret roots. His bespoke suit, tailored to perfection, cost more than his family's old shack, and his polished shoes caught the light with every step. At 22, he was no longer the boy who'd scraped by on borrowed pencils. He was a junior executive, his name whispered in boardrooms for his innovative microfinance strategies. The city's skyline stretched before him, a constellation of glass and steel that promised power, wealth, and a future he'd once only dreamed of under a baobab tree. The gala was a celebration of Zenith's latest merger, and Umaru's role in sealing the deal had earned him a coveted invitation. He sipped his drink, the champagne's bubbles sharp against his tongue, and scanned the crowd. Politicians in crisp tuxedos, entrepreneurs with Rolexes glinting, women in dresses that shimmered like liquid gold. This was his new world, a far cry from Eldoret's dusty markets, and he reveled in it. Yet beneath his polished exterior, a faint unease lingered, a shadow of a promise he'd made to Kamaria, whose sacrifice had built the foundation of his success. He pushed the thought aside, letting the night's energy sweep him forward. Umaru, there you are. Mr. Karaoke, his boss, clapped a hand on his shoulder, his voice booming with pride. Come, there's someone you need to meet. He steered Umaru toward a woman standing near the terrace's edge, her silhouette framed against the city's glow. Juliet was a vision, her porcelain skin luminous under the soft lights, her green eyes sharp with intelligence. Her emerald gown hugged her frame, and her presence seemed to command the air around her. This is Juliet Moreau, Mr. Karaoke said, his tone reverent. Corporate lawyer, Cambridge educated, and daughter of Henri Moreau, who owns half of Westland's real estate. Juliet extended a hand, her handshake firm, her smile warm but measured. I've heard about your work on the microfinance project, she said, her accent carrying the refined cadence of global elites. Empowering rural entrepreneurs with sustainable loans? It's exactly what Kenya needs. Umaru's breath caught, not just at her beauty, but at the way her words mirrored his own ambitions. For the first time in months, Kamaria's memory, her radiant smile, her faith in him, faded, replaced by a woman who seemed born for the world he was now navigating. They drifted to a quieter corner of the terrace, the city's hum a backdrop to their conversation. Juliet spoke with a passion that matched her poise, dissecting economic policy with a clarity that left Umaru captivated. She shared his vision for a modern Kenya, one where innovation could lift entire communities from poverty. Your ideas could reshape rural economies, she said, leaning closer, her eyes locking with his. But it takes more than brilliance. It takes connections, influence. That's where people like me come in. Her confidence was magnetic, her world of private schools and international summits, a tantalizing glimpse of what Umaru could become. He found himself opening up, sharing his plans for scaling microfinance across East Africa, his voice alive with a fervor he hadn't felt since his days dreaming with Kamaria. Juliet listened intently, her sharp mind dissecting his ideas, offering insights that sparked new possibilities. As they laughed over a shared disdain for bureaucratic red tape, Umaru felt a shift, a sense that he'd found someone who not only understood his ambitions, but could walk beside him in the corridors of power he was just beginning to enter. Her father's name alone opened doors to Nairobi's uppermost echelons, and her presence promised a partnership that could elevate him beyond his wildest dreams. The night blurred into a series of stolen moments, Juliet's hand brushing his as they reached for the same glass, her laughter ringing like music when he recounted a clumsy internship mishap. For the first time, Umaru didn't feel like an outsider in this glittering world. With Juliet, he belonged. The baobab tree, Kamaria's tin of shillings, the promises made in Eldoret. They receded, buried beneath the allure of a life that felt within reach. He didn't notice how easily he slipped into her orbit, how her sophistication made his past feel small, insignificant. As the gala wound down, Juliet handed him her card, her fingers lingering on his. Let's continue this over dinner, she said, her smile a promise of more than just business. Umaru nodded, his heart racing, the card burning in his pocket like a key to a new destiny. They parted with a lingering glance, the city's lights reflecting in her eyes, and Umaru felt the final threads of his old life fraying. He stepped into the elevator, the gala's buzz fading, and caught his reflection in the mirrored walls. A man transformed, poised on the edge of greatness. Back in his sleek apartment in Nairobi's Kilimani district, Umaru tossed Juliet's card onto his desk, next to a stack of financial reports. The room was a testament to his ascent: modern furniture, a view of the skyline, a framed Zenith contract on the wall. But as he loosened his tie, his gaze fell on a small photo in a drawer, barely visible beneath a pile of papers. It was he and Kamaria, laughing under the baobab tree, their faces alight with dreams. He hesitated, then closed the drawer, the click echoing in the silent room. Juliet's world was his now, and he would seize it with both hands, unaware that every step deeper into this new love was a step further from the promises that had made it possible. Nairobi's financial district pulsed with ambition, its glass towers reflecting the relentless sun that bathed Umaru's sleek corner office at Zenith Capital. At 22, he was a force. His microfinance initiatives had earned him a promotion, a six-figure bonus, and a reputation as the firm's rising star. His desk, polished to a mirror sheen, held a laptop streaming market data, a leather-bound planner, and a framed photo of him shaking hands with Kenya's finance minister. The boy from Eldoret was gone, replaced by a man who commanded boardrooms with a single glance. Yet beneath the tailored suits and confident smiles, a quiet dissonance simmered. A promise to Kamaria, buried under layers of ambition and the intoxicating pull of his new life with Juliet. Umaru leaned back in his ergonomic chair, reviewing a merger proposal that could cement his legacy at Zenith. The office hummed with the soft clatter of keyboards and the murmur of colleagues sealing multi-million-dollar deals. His phone buzzed, Kamaria's name flashing on the screen like a ghost from another lifetime. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the decline button. Juliet's laughter from their latest dinner, her green eyes sparkling over candlelight, flashed in his mind. Kamaria's calls had become rare, each one a reminder of a debt he wasn't ready to face. He let it ring, the sound swallowed by the office's sterile hum, and turned back to his work. Hours later, alone in his Kilimani apartment, Umaru's phone buzzed again. Kamaria's voice message was strained, her usual warmth frayed by desperation. Umaru, it's my mother. She's in the hospital. Pneumonia. The bills are crushing us. Can you help? Please. Her words hung in the air, heavy with a vulnerability that clawed at his conscience. He stared out at Nairobi's glittering skyline, his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, a stranger in a silk tie. The apartment, modern, minimalist, with imported appliances, felt like a fortress, shielding him from the dusty streets of Eldoret. He opened his banking app, transferred $100, a drop in the ocean of his monthly bonus, and typed a quick text. So sorry, Kamaria. Sent something. Swamped with work. We'll call soon. The send button felt like a betrayal, the words hollow even as he wrote them. He imagined Kamaria in her family's cramped home, her vibrant beauty dulled by worry, counting shillings to keep her mother alive. But the thought was fleeting, drowned by the buzz of a new message from Juliet. Dinner tomorrow? New place in Westlands? Umaru's lips curved into a smile, the weight of Kamaria's plea already fading. He was building a life with Juliet, a woman whose world of influence and elegance matched his ambitions. Kamaria, with her market-stall dreams, belonged to a past he was outgrowing. In Eldoret, the fluorescent lights of Moi Teaching Hospital cast a harsh glow over Kamaria's exhausted frame. She sat in a plastic chair outside the ICU, her once bright headscarf faded from countless washes, her eyes red from sleepless nights. Her mother's pneumonia had worsened, the ventilators and medications costing more than their family could ever earn. Umaru's $100 had covered a single day's oxygen, a cruel reminder of how far he'd drifted. Kamaria clutched her phone, rereading his text, each word a knife. Swamped with work. She remembered the boy who'd wept under the baobab tree, promising to repay her sacrifice. That boy was gone, replaced by a stranger who sent pocket change to ease his guilt. Days bled into nights, the hospital's sterile corridors becoming Kamaria's world. Nurses whispered updates, their words a blur of medical terms and grim prognoses. Kamaria sold her mother's jewelry, borrowed from neighbors, and tutored children for pennies, but the bills mounted like a tidal wave. When her mother's heart monitor flatlined, the sound was a scream that tore through her soul. She sat frozen, the world collapsing around her, as doctors offered condolences she couldn't hear. Alone in the grief, she texted Umaru, "She's gone. Funeral tomorrow." His reply came hours later, curt and distant. "I'm so sorry, I'll be there." Meanwhile, on Diani Beach, the Atlantic Ocean whispered against the shore, its waves a soft applause for Umaru's meticulously planned moment. Candles flickered in the sea breeze, their light dancing across a table strewn with rose petals. Juliet sat across from him, radiant in a flowing white dress, her laughter musical as she recounted a case she'd won in court. The diamond ring in Umaru's pocket felt like a key to his future, a future with Juliet, her father's connections, and a life among Nairobi's untouchables. He stood, heart racing, and dropped to one knee. Juliet Moreau, you've shown me a world I never knew existed. Will you marry me? Her gasp was audible, her yes immediate, sealed with a kiss that tasted of champagne and destiny. The ring, worth more than most Eldoret families earned in a year, sparkled on her finger, a symbol of the life Umaru had chosen. In that moment, Kamaria's loss, her mother's death, the promises made under the baobab tree, they were shadows, banished by the brilliance of his new world. He didn't think of Eldoret's dusty streets or the tin of shillings that had bought his success. He thought only of Juliet, of the power they would wield together. The next morning, as Umaru sipped coffee in his beachfront suite, his phone rang. Aisha, Kamaria's friend, spoke through tears. Kamaria's mother is gone, Umaru. She needed you, and you sent $100. She's broken, and you're out there living like a king. Her words hit like a sledgehammer, shattering the euphoria of the night before. Umaru's hands shook, the coffee cup clattering against the saucer. Kamaria's grief, her loss, was a debt he couldn't outrun, no matter how high he climbed. I'll be there, he whispered, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. As he booked a flight to Eldoret, the ring on Juliet's finger gleamed in his mind, a cruel contrast to the funeral he was about to face. The air in Eldoret hung heavy with grief, the scent of dust and wilting flowers mingling as mourners gathered at Kamaria's family compound. The modest courtyard, framed by cracked mud walls, buzzed with soft wails and the rhythmic chant of traditional dirges. Women in faded black cloths sat in circles, their voices weaving tales of Kamaria's mother's kindness, while men stood in hushed clusters, heads bowed. Umaru stepped out of a chauffeured car, his bespoke suit jarring against the simplicity of the scene, like a diamond dropped in the dirt. At 22, he was a stranger here, his polished shoes sinking into the red earth that had once been his home. The weight of Kamaria's loss pressed against his chest, her friend Aisha's words echoing, "She needed you, and you sent $100. He scanned the crowd, his heart lurching as he spotted Kamaria. She sat apart, her vibrant beauty dulled by sorrow, her faded black headscarf a stark contrast to the radiant yellow she once wore. Her eyes, once bright with dreams, were now hollow, etched with a pain that cut deeper than any blade. Umaru took a step toward her, his throat tight with guilt, but her gaze met his. Cold, accusing, a silent indictment that stopped him in his tracks. Without a word, she rose and walked into the house where her mother's body lay in state, her rejection more devastating than any outburst. The crowd's murmurs grew sharper, their stares heavy with judgment. This was not the Umaru they'd known, the boy who'd played in these streets. This was a man who'd traded his roots for Nairobi's glittering towers. Aisha intercepted him, her face a mask of quiet fury. "She doesn't want to see you," she said, her voice low but piercing. "Kamaria says the Umaru she knew died long ago. You're just a stranger in a fancy suit now." The words struck like a physical blow, stripping away the veneer of success Umaru had wrapped himself in. He clutched the condolence envelope in his hand, stuffed with cash, a feeble attempt to atone for his absence. But Aisha's glare told him it was meaningless. "She needed you when her mother was dying," Aisha continued. "You sent pocket change while you planned your fancy proposal. Go home, Umaru. You don't belong here anymore." She turned away, leaving him alone in the courtyard, the dirges swelling around him like a tide. Maru stood frozen, the envelope crumpling in his fist. Memories of Kamaria's sacrifice, the tin of shillings, her unwavering faith under the baobab tree, flooded back, each one a shard of glass in his conscience. He had sent $100, thinking it enough, while her mother fought for breath in a hospital bed. He had chosen Juliet's world, her elegance, her power, over the woman who'd given up everything to make him. The realization was a slow poison, seeping into every corner of his being. He wanted to run to Kamaria, to beg forgiveness, but her absence was a wall he couldn't breach. Dawn broke over Eldoret, painting the sky in soft pinks that clashed with the somber funeral home where Umaru sat on the steps. His suit wrinkled, his eyes red from a sleepless night. The mourners had dispersed, leaving only the hum of distant traffic and the weight of his failure. Soft footsteps approached, and he looked up to see Kamaria, her face gaunt, her hands clutching a worn leather journal. "You need to know the truth," she said, her voice hollow, stripped of the warmth that once defined her. She sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance, and opened the journal to a faded letter, its edges yellowed with time. "This is from the University of Nairobi," she said, her fingers trembling as she traced the words. "A full medical school scholarship. I was going to be a pediatrician, save children's lives. I gave it up for you." Umaru's breath caught, his world tilting. "You never told me," he whispered, his voice breaking. Kamaria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I knew you'd refuse the money if you knew. That tin wasn't just savings. It was my registration, my books, my future. When I couldn't pay, they gave my spot to someone else." Her words were a sledgehammer, shattering the lies Umaru had told himself. She hadn't just given up money, she'd sacrificed her calling, her chance to heal, her entire destiny, believing in a promise he'd broken. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her gaze unflinching. "I trusted you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I thought our dreams were one, that you'd lift me up as I lifted you. But you moved on, Umaru. You chose a world where I didn't belong." The journal lay open between them, its pages filled with her neat handwriting. Plans for medical school, sketches of children she'd hoped to save. Each word was a testament to the life she'd lost, a life he'd taken for granted. Umaru's hands shook, his throat burning with words he couldn't find. "I didn't know," he stammered, but the excuse felt hollow, a coward's plea. Kamaria closed the journal, her movements deliberate. "You didn't ask," she said simply. "You were too busy building your empire to see me drowning." She stood, brushing dust from her faded cloth, her dignity a quiet rebuke. "I don't hate you, Umaru, but I can't look at you without seeing everything I lost." She walked away, her silhouette fading into the morning light, leaving Umaru alone with the truth he could no longer deny. The funeral home steps were cold beneath him, the journal's weight a phantom in the air. He had gained the world, Zenith, Juliet, a life of power. But at what cost? Kamaria's sacrifice was the foundation of his success, and he'd repaid her with indifference, with $100 in empty promises. The man he'd become stared back at him, unrecognizable, and for the first time, Umaru saw the hollowness of his triumph. The reckoning had begun, and no amount of wealth could shield him from the consequences of his betrayal. The Eldoret funeral home stood silent under the breaking dawn, its weathered walls bearing witness to a collision of worlds. Umaru sat on the steps, his once pristine suit stained with tears and dust, the weight of Kamaria's revelation crushing his soul. Her journal, now gone with her retreating figure, had laid bare the truth. She had sacrificed a medical school scholarship, her dream of saving children, to fund his rise. The $100 he'd sent, while her mother died, was a betrayal that echoed in the hollow spaces of his heart. Nairobi's glittering towers, Juliet's elegance, his zenith empire, all felt like ashes now, built on the ruins of Kamaria's future. As he clutched his head, a car's engine purred in the distance, and his blood ran cold. Juliet's sleek sedan pulled up, her silhouette unmistakable through the tinted windows. Juliet stepped out, her tailored dress a stark contrast to Eldoret's red earth, her green eyes scanning the scene with a lawyer's precision. She approached, her heels clicking, her face a mix of concern and suspicion. "Umaru, what's going on?" she called, her voice carrying across the quiet morning. "I've been calling you. Why are you here?" Her gaze flicked to the funeral home, to Umaru's tear-streaked face, and then to Kamaria, standing nearby, her faded black cloth a testament to her grief. The air thickened, a storm brewing in the space between them. "Who is she?" Juliet asked, her tone measured but sharp, honed by years in courtrooms. Umaru opened his mouth, but words failed him, his guilt a chokehold. Kamaria stepped forward, her dignity unbroken despite her pain. "I'm Kamaria," she said, her voice steady, eyes locked on Juliet. "I'm the reason Umaru could afford to become the man you love. I gave up my life, my medical school scholarship, so he could have his." She held up her worn journal, its pages fluttering like a flag of sacrifice. "When my mother was dying, he sent $100 in excuses while he planned to marry you." Juliet's breath hitched, her sharp mind piecing together the fragments. Umaru's distant calls, his evasive silences, the secret he'd buried. "You built your success on her sacrifice," she said, turning to Umaru, her voice trembling with betrayal. "And you abandoned her when she needed you most." Her eyes, once warm with love, now burned with a clarity that cut through his defenses. Kamaria's strength, her quiet resilience, stood in stark contrast to Umaru's deception. Juliet's hand moved to her engagement ring, the diamond catching the dawn's light like a captured star. "Juliet, please," Umaru pleaded, his voice cracking. "Let me explain." But Juliet shook her head, her composure cracking. "You lied about who you are, about how you got here. Every moment we shared was built on her loss." She turned to Kamaria, her voice softening with respect. "You're extraordinary. I'm so sorry for what he took from you." Kamaria nodded, tears falling, but her gaze held no malice. "I believed love meant sacrifice," she said. "I was wrong to think it meant erasing myself." Juliet slipped the ring from her finger, its weight a symbol of a future now shattered. She held it out to Umaru, her eyes unflinching. "I can't marry you," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Not because of your past, but because you forgot who you were and betrayed the woman who made you. A man who does that will do it again." She dropped the ring into his palm, the metal cold against his skin, and walked back to her car, her shoulders straight despite the heartbreak. The engine roared to life, and she was gone, leaving Umaru kneeling in the dust, the ring a meaningless relic of his ambition. Kamaria watched him, her face etched with sorrow but no anger. "What do I do?" Umaru whispered, his voice raw, tears streaming. "How do I fix this?" She knelt beside him, her presence a quiet anchor. "You can't fix it," she said, her words gentle but unyielding. "Some things, once broken, stay broken, but you can choose who you want to be now." She picked up the ring, studying its cold brilliance, then placed it back in his hand. "Success without integrity is failure, Umaru. Money without compassion is just expensive emptiness." "I can change," he begged, his voice desperate. "Give me a chance." Kamaria stood, brushing dust from her clothes. "The chance isn't for me," she said. "I've rebuilt my life. I'm in nursing school, paying my way, saving lives one step at a time. The chance is for others, young people like you, who need someone to believe in them." She tucked her journal under her arm, her eyes steady. "Promise you'll use your success to lift them, the way I tried to lift you. Not with empty words, but with action." Umaru nodded, sobbing, the ring cutting into his palm. Kamaria turned, her silhouette fading into the morning light. A woman who had lost everything but found her strength. The funeral home stood silent, its walls holding the echoes of their confrontation. Umaru remained on the steps, the man he'd become unraveling. Juliet's rejection, Kamaria's truth, they were mirrors reflecting his hollow triumphs. But in Kamaria's final words, he glimpsed a path forward, not to erase his sins but to atone through deeds. The baobab tree miles away in Eldoret's market square stood as it always had, its roots deep, its branches wide. It had seen their promises, their pain, and now this reckoning. Umaru's journey was not over, but the man who rose from the steps was no longer the one who'd arrived. Kamaria's sacrifice, Juliet's departure, they were wounds that would shape him, if he let them. For now he held the ring, its sparkle dimmed, and vowed to honor the woman who'd given him everything. Not with wealth, but with a legacy of lifting others as she had lifted him. What a journey, right? Did Umaru's betrayal break your heart, or did Kamaria's strength inspire you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what this story meant to you and where you're watching from. Your insights make our community thrive. So hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications to never miss a tale of love, sacrifice, and redemption. Thank you for joining us under the baobab tree, for feeling every twist and turn with us. We're so grateful for your support and can't wait to share more stories that spark your soul. Until next time, keep lifting others as you rise, and we'll see you soon.